Guys, welcome into this live edition of the Jenks Island Podcast. I'm your host, Grayson Jenkins, joined again by my great friend and co-host, Ty. And in today's live episode, we're going to be breaking down our wild card weekend picks and predictions. It's a fun little slate of games this weekend, 2 today, 3 tomorrow. So make sure to come in and join and comment your thoughts on the games, and we will give you guys our thoughts on your thoughts while we're breaking these games down. But before we get into the games, real quick, shout out to the the winner, I should say, of the Jenks Island Pick'em group for this season. It was Ryan. Cliff, if you are watching this or if you see this after we post the live to YouTube and everything, make sure to comment down below or reach out to us. Cliff, when I went in and posted the scores last week during the episode, he was at 70 points for week 17. And then after week 18 finished, it went up to 110. And so that's how he got to the first spot. So I don't know what exactly happened there, how that happened, but he was at like 7th when I posted the week 17 or week 18 predictions. So a little bit suspicious, but make sure to reach out to us so we can figure that out for sure. Anyways, moving on to the wild card game. Starting off, we got the Rams taking on the Panthers here, Ty. This one's a fun one. Carolina, right? I think they're like 10-point underdogs at this point in time. The Rams coming in, they lost to Carolina in Charlotte. I don't believe Matthew Stafford has ever won in Charlotte either for, I think, any of his teams. So an interesting little tidbit there. But what are your thoughts on this one? It's a fun game, but Bryce Young and the Panthers are 8-9. They don't really fit in with this playoffs.
Yeah, on paper, right, this should be, a wash, right? Like everyone should be picking the Rams. The Rams are obviously, one of the three best teams in the NFC. And I think you could probably say all three teams in the NFC West are the three best teams, right? Seahawks, Rams, Niners, are amongst like the Super Bowl favorites for a lot of people. But yeah, like you said, right, Carolina beat them last time in Carolina. They're in Carolina today. They might get some rain, which definitely will have an impact on the game. I don't think it'll have too much of an impact because Stafford has never really struggled in inclement weather. If you go back to last year's playoffs against the Eagles when it was snowing, and he didn't really have trouble. He kind of had him down to the wire with a chance to go up at the end of the game on throw to Puka Nacua. So, I think it does help too. I don't think they had Devontae last time they played this game. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think Devontae is going to be back today.
Yes.
So, that's obviously huge. And I just think, as long as Carolina can, as long as LA can contain Ted McMillan, it makes this game a lot harder. Obviously, last time Bryce Young had a really good game through the air against, Rams secondary that throughout the year we've talked about, the ups and downs with them, right? At sometimes we thought, okay, this could actually be a pretty good secondary. And then other times we've said, okay, this is, the true weakness of this team is the secondary. And it's something that you can attack because, obviously we know their front, Braden Fisk and Jared Verse and Landman at the linebacker, right? Like they have a really good run stopping front, but the pass game is something that you can take advantage of. So for Carolina, right, it's how much can we get Ted McMillan the ball through the air? Can Jalen Coker have an impact? Can some of the tight ends get involved in the pass game, right? Like, Carolina, if they can have success through the air, they have a really good chance. And then, you make Stafford or Kyron Williams, fumble or throw an interception because it is wet weather, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is something Kyron Williams has had fumble issues throughout his career. So does the rain have an impact on him? Does that mean a reduced number of carries, right? Do they go more of that 13 personnel, what they've gone through in pretty much the second half of the season with Blake Corum at running back, a guy who has not had fumble problems in his career, right? A reliable back at Michigan as well. So I'm interested to see, what happens with the weather, and then B, what is Carolina's game plan? And I think it does have to be attack them through the air.
Yeah, I do think that this one, I think the Panthers can cover the spread, right? Especially if it's at 10 points when the game starts with the rain, depending on how the sports books kind of fix that or change it. But I do think the Rams win this one. I think that with Devontae Adams back, they'll be able to overpower for long enough to outstand the Panthers offense, right? I think they can outscore the Panthers offense in this one pretty easily. Like you said, it does come down to ball security though. Landman, I'm glad that you brought him up. He's been punching the ball out of everyone's hands, no matter who it is, who the running backs are. He's punched them out of a lot of guys that don't have fumble issues. And if Chuba Hubbard and Rico Dowdle can hold on the ball, have a solid running game, the Panthers have a shot. But I do think the Rams come out with a victory here in Carolina. Anyways, moving on, we got the Packers taking on the Bears. The Bears last week lost to the Detroit Lions, a game that I was honestly surprised by. I thought the Bears were going to try to run it down the Lions' throat. I thought that they would get revenge over the Lions. Ben Johnson would kind of again say, "Hey, I am the owner of the NFC North now." That didn't happen, right? Like it just didn't happen. They got shut down and the Lions won. That concerns me going into this game, even against a Packers defense without Micah Parsons. Both of these games with the Packers were close. Packers ended up winning the first one, lost the second one in overtime. Jordan Love is going to be back in this game. It's in Chicago. Chicago fans are going to be going crazy, but I do think that the Packers can come into Chicago and get a revenge for that overtime loss. It was an overtime game loss for the Packers, and I think that is what makes me a little bit more cautious picking the Bears in this one, especially after last week's performance against the Detroit team that has been struggling on defense for a few weeks now, and they put up a goose egg practically against them. That scares me against the Packers team, whose offense is also capable. The Lions are a capable offense. The Packers are too. Josh Jacobs been rested up the past few weeks. I mean, like before week 18, week 17, week 16, he was getting few carries so that they could rest him a little bit for his injury, get him into the playoffs healthy. And I think he's going to be ready to go, and he should be able to have a good game. Give me the Packers here against the Bears. Ty, who do you got?
Yeah, I like that you brought up the Josh Jacobs workload, because I think that, the latter half of the season, a lot of people wanted to pick the Packers, but then you come out and Josh Jacobs would have 3 carries. And, that offense, I know Jordan Love has historically played well late in the season, and I want to see that because he hasn't quite done that, obviously, with the injuries.
Mm-hmm.
But, look at the Denver game, look at some of the other games he played late in the season this year. Hasn't played as well, but the offense does run through Josh Jacobs, right? If they can establish the run game, it opens up everything in the pass game. It's a classic West Coast offense. Like LaFleur comes from that Shanahan type of offense where they want to establish the run, then get into the play action game, take some deep shots. So, that's really what I want to see first is Josh Jacobs going to be established in the run game, right? And then from there, can Jordan Love play turnover-free football, right? Because that has been an issue at times in his career where in big games, he's thrown just a stupid, bonehead interception. Jenks, you talk about it all the time. It's the Jekyll and Hyde with him.
Yep.
On the flip side, right, Caleb Williams, hasn't taken advantage of certain situations against this Green Bay Packers team, right? First game, they come down and he's got a chance to put them in a chance to win the football game or tie the football game, I believe it was, but, throws the interception. And then the second time around, no Micah Parsons, Caleb Williams goes down. And I think Malik Willis ended up hurting his shoulder in that game too. That was when he first hurt the shoulder. So obviously, they go to overtime, but that game should have been pretty much a wash, right? Without Micah, their whole defense changes. And then offensively, right, without Jordan Love, they should have been able to pull away more. So it's concerning that these games have been so close for Chicago. Then you bring up the Detroit game. And Detroit, like you said, they've been struggling defensively. Green Bay, although they're injured, I still think that their defense is better than Detroit's is at this point in time. Trayvon Diggs, adding him definitely helped them out in the last week of the season. He played pretty well against the Vikings. So, both these teams need to establish the run, but if Green Bay does, I think Green Bay runs away with it. So I'm going to go with Green Bay here too. I just trust them at full strength and full health, at least offensively, with Jordan Love more than I trust Chicago. I would even trust the Packers if Malik Willis was in with how well we saw him play.
Yeah, STERB came in. He said, no, Micah, give me Chicago. Yeah, I think STERB here, I think that Jordan Love should be able to step up and beat the Bears. But I will say this real quick. The Bears and the Ravens both had Malik Willis. They allowed Malik Willis to play at a level where Dan Orlovsky is now saying he should make $40 to $50 million next season. And it was an absurd take when Dan Orlovsky put that out.
That's a crazy.
I don't like, he is not that kind of quarterback. I don't think he's to the level of Jordan Love. Yeah. Like I think Jordan Love is going to elevate this offense. Josh Jacobs being back helps a lot. So the Packers should be able to win here. And it would be a really good victory for them. I think it would put them against the Seahawks next week. That's a tough matchup, but I think they should be able to at least pass Chicago this weekend. Moving on, Todd, we got the Bills taking on the Jaguars. The Jaguars are absolutely red hot. Trevor Lawrence is playing the best he ever has under Liam Cohen. And the Bills on the other side, their offense is sort of struggling. Don't necessarily have all the receiver help that you want for Josh Allen. They have a good running back in Cook. But Josh Allen, the Bills, relatively struggling right now. What are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I think Jacksonville is another team that really needs to establish the run. I mean, we talk about this a lot, right? In the postseason, the teams that can run the football are the teams that go far, but specifically against this Buffalo Bills team because they are, bottom 5 in rushing defense and top. I think they're top 2 at least. They were top for a bit. I don't know where the stats ended up falling at the end of the season, but they were one of the better pass defenses in the NFL. Tre'Davious White has played well. Christian Benford's played well. They're pretty good on the back end, but can they get Travis Etienne going? Trevor Lawrence, unlock him in the run game a little bit, right? I think in the second half of the season, not only has he been great, throwing the ball, but the use of his legs, especially in the red zone, has been a problem. He scored a lot of rushing touchdowns in that area. So, can they establish the quarterback run, the Etienne? And then I think that eventually opens up things in the passing game for Jacoby Myers, BTJ, guys like that. I think Buffalo has performed well. I don't think that talent-wise that they're the best, great secondary. So I think that there are some things that you can take advantage of there. On the flip side, though, it's Josh Allen, right? And he is so hard. He's probably the hardest quarterback in the NFL to bring down. He's going up against a really good defense. Jacksonville is playing, started the season off pretty well, tailed off a little bit, but then picked up really well at the end of the season defensively. And, it's just, I think the story of the game is going to be, can they bring Josh Allen down, right? Because if you allow him to extend plays, to, break sacks, like he becomes a problem at that point because anytime, any good DB knows this, it's really hard to play against a quarterback like that because zone defense, man defense, whatever it becomes man, right? You have to stick on your guy. You have to follow, and man defense, 30 yards downfield with a running back that's not, receiver that's not running a route, right? It's kind of scramble draw at that point. That is some of the hardest coverage to have. So, can Josh take advantage of situations like that, like he has all season long, like he has for the past several years, with Khalil Shakir, Dalton Kincaid, guys like that, and James Cook too. He's obviously been a huge part of this offense. The run game, he led the NFL in rushing yards. Can they get him going? At the end of the day, I think that, Jacksonville is playing really well, and I believe in what they're doing on offense and defense. I think they can have long-term success. I just can't doubt Josh Allen. I think he's too hard to beat at this point in his career. And, you saw him take over in that New England game, right? They were down so much. And then he came back in that second half and said, screw it, and just started balling out and really carried them back by himself. So I'm going to go with Buffalo on this one just because I believe in Josh.
Yeah, no, that's exactly kind of my mindset going into this game is, do I pick against Josh or do I pick the better team right now? And I do think I have to go with the better team at this point in time. I think the being home helps them a lot too. It'll be in Jacksonville versus in Buffalo. Maybe if it's in Buffalo, I'm a little bit more worried. But Josh Allen has to elevate this offense at such a high degree to be able to beat a team like the Jaguars. And I don't know if he's able to with this week of a receiver room. And I'm honestly, it's such a disappointment for this season for the Bills because I do think this is probably their best shot in the AFC in a long time. And probably Josh Allen's whole career where they could have made a run into the Super Bowl because you don't have the Ravens, you don't have the Chiefs, you don't have great teams to go through in comparison to past seasons. Now, the Bills, they could have gone and gotten Chris Olave or Rashid Shaheed. I don't think Chris Olave was available, but Rashid Shaheed definitely was. And if you got a guy like that for Josh Allen, I think it significantly would have elevated this offense and given them a lot more of the deep threat aspect to open up more of the Khalil Shakir short routes, things like that in the middle of the field. But the run game, if they can get that going, like you said, that should help. Maybe get the tight ends involved in the pass game as well with, not the greatest receivers. But the Jaguars, their team is playing so red hot right now. It's hard for me to doubt them. I'm going to pick the Jaguars here, but you guys know me. The Bills are my mom's team, probably my second favorite team just because of that. So I'll be picking the Jaguars, but rooting for the Bills. And STERB says, Ty zigging, Jenks and I jagging. Yes. Yeah. You and I are both jagging today, STERB, with the Jaguars in Jacksonville. That'll be a really, really fun game tomorrow.
I'll say this about Buffalo, though.
Sorry, go ahead,
I know we talked about, this is their best shot, right? Because there's no Burrow, there's no Lamar, there's no Mahomes. I think depending if they lose this game, right, or even if they win it, coming into next season, I think we're going to start having conversations about a new era in the AFC, right? If Trevor Lawrence can continue this type of play, if Drake Maye can continue this type of play, Bo Nix, right? Like these young guys kind of starting to take over the AFC. That was 1, 2, and 3 seed in the AFC, or even just defensively, right? Do Josh, Lamar, Pat, they don't have the elite defense that Houston, that New England has a pretty good defense, that, Jacksonville, that Denver have. So I think it's kind of, I know we're saying like, okay, it's their easiest path because they don't have these great teams, but I think we're kind of ushering in this new era of be really well coached, have a pretty good young quarterback, have a good defense, and you're probably one of the better teams in the AFC and poised to take down some of the best quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a valid take. I do think that the AFC needs to, especially those teams you mentioned, the Chiefs, the Ravens, and the Bills, they need to strongly reevaluate the talent on the team and kind of readapt to what they're trying to do. All three of those teams, like you said, both sides of the ball need improvement. So I do think that the Jaguars and the Broncos, at least, the Patriots, I think maybe the Bills could compete with them for the next couple of years. Like maybe that's a little bit closer, but I do think that the Broncos and who's the other team?
Jaguars.
I said the Jaguars. I think those guys will both be solidified at the top of their division, at least for the next couple of seasons, or at least they should be at this point in time. Anyways, moving on to the next Sunday game, we got the 49ers taking on the Eagles in the Link. So this one, you got the 49ers who are coming out. Their defense has been struggling as of recently. They were red hot on offense going into the Seattle game last week and then put up a dud, 13-3, I believe the final score was. And the 49ers significantly struggled on that side of the ball, even with George Kittle back. CMC, thank God to all the fantasy owners out there that had CMC. They're extremely happy that he put up that performance in week 18 and not week 17 or 16. But he didn't have a great game. The Seahawks were able to significantly hinder that offense. And the Eagles on the other side are a team whose defense has been getting back to what it was last year in my eyes. I think they're a defense that is looking to just shut down the 49ers enough so that Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, their offense can get something going. And I think they'll be able to outlast the 49ers here offensively and defensively. And it's at home, so that gives me just a little bit more of a bump towards leaning towards the Eagles. I'm going to go with the Eagles here in this game. I do think they're the better team. I do think the 49ers are a solid offense, but their defense is struggling right now. And that could be because they're beat up, right? This team is riddled with injuries on both sides of the ball, and you got to feel for them. But the Eagles are the better team right now. So give me the Eagles. Ty, who do you have here?
I just have a really hard time trusting this Philadelphia offense because we have seen them struggle to establish the run, right, with Saquon all throughout the season. The ups and downs in the passing game with, the Hurts disconnection with A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith. I know they started to pick it up towards the end of the season, but I do have just concerns about, Kevin Petula's offense, the scheme of it all. And you're going up against a defensive coordinator in Rob Saleh, who, yes, his team is banged up, but he's a very, smart defensive coordinator. He's going to have these guys dialed up, and they still have some good talent on that back end that has stepped up in wake of injuries. For me, it does come down to the 49ers offense versus the Eagles defense. And I think the way that San Francisco was playing in the second half of the season, minus that Seattle game, which Seattle is, the best defense in the NFL, if not, at least top three, right? It's Houston, them, and Denver. I think that San Francisco can do enough to score against Philly that I just don't think Philly will be able to keep up with them at the end of the day, right? Brock Purdy was playing so high, and I called it coming to the Seattle game. Like I did say, I think that they'll keep rolling, and obviously they were stopped there, right, by Seattle. But I think that's, the division rivals, they already played each other. We saw it the first time around. It was a low-scoring game. I just, last year too, the Rams came into Philly. They gave them a run for their money at the end there too, and it was a lot of, honestly, what it came down to, I think Kyron Williams fumbled in that game, and it kind of did end up screwing LA. I think if San Francisco can hold on to the football, they're going to be able to put up enough points to beat this Philly team. I know that their defense is playing well and that they have a good defense, but I just don't feel confident in Philly at all, especially with Lane Johnson questionable. That's tough. A guy that you're not going to get any pass rush against him. They bring in the backup tackles, Fred Johnson, I believe it is. He's been fine, but he's not Lane Johnson level, obviously. So I really like San Francisco. I like their offense a lot, and I struggle to believe in Philly. So I'm going to go with 49ers here.
Yeah, I don't mind that take at all. I just think it's kind of the inverse of what your thoughts are, right? I think that the Eagles can outlast the 49ers, but I do think, like you said, it could be a higher scoring game relatively. I do think both teams will be able to score, but I think the Eagles defense, it's just better than the 49ers defense. So that's the kind of my reasoning there. But anyways, moving on, Ty, to the third Sunday game and the final Sunday game, we got the Chargers taking on the Patriots. The Patriots, right, their whole entire season has led up to this moment of all year. They haven't played a good team. They haven't played a good team. They haven't played any good teams. They lost to the Bills the second time around, and now they're playing the Chargers, who are another good team, a playoff-worthy team in the first round. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I talked about this a little bit on my TikTok and Instagram, post that I dropped this past week. I think that New England's going to take it to them. I really think that they are, I think they're the better football team, but I think the attitude right now, because the Chargers sat their starters against Denver in a game that if the Chargers beat Denver, New England was obviously winning that game against the Jets. New England had a good chance to be the 1 seed there. Do I think that the Chargers would have beat us? I don't know. They obviously beat us earlier in the season, but they're a little bit more banged up now than they were then. I think they're going to come out pissed off. Vrabel's going to have these guys fired up. It's kind of bulletin board material, right? To be like, yeah, these guys laid down and, didn't even care enough to put out their starters there and give us a chance, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that is the type of thing that Vrabel uses in his locker room to fire these guys up. But at the end of the day, I think there's the healthier football team, the better football team right now. I know that, they've had some issues in the locker room with Christian Barmore and Stephon Diggs, and some lawsuits, but they're both playing. Milton Williams is back. When you look at the Chargers team, obviously they had to rest Herbert and Amarian Hampton in that game because they were both banged up and have been banged up in the latter half of the season, but they don't have their star tackles. Defensively, they played well against Denver, but they have been up and down at times, and kind of, have had some injuries over there too. So I just think they're not healthy enough to be competing with a team like New England. I think Drake Maye has the chance to have a really good game against this defense too. I know they're well coached, but so is New England, right? Josh McDaniels has been around, especially with New England, and had a lot of success with their quarterback. So I think that New England's going to probably roll them in this game. I don't necessarily see it being close. And we've seen Justin Herbert struggle in the playoffs both times that he's been here, especially last year, 4 interceptions. I think that New England's defense is good enough to, pressure him with a bad offensive line, a banged up offensive line, and then on the back end, take advantage of some of those opportunities.
Yeah, I'm going to go opposite you here, but I do think all those reasonings are valid, and I do think the Patriots could very well win this game. But I think the Chargers here, Justin Herbert, if Omarion Hampton is back in this game, I think that's a big if. If Omarion Hampton's out, that does significantly hinder this mindset and my thoughts in this game. But I think with him, it gives him a little bit of an opportunity to have a run game. It gives him a good check down option, better than Vidal and whoever else they have at their second level running backs. But I do think that the Chargers offense is good enough to outlast this Patriots defense to score a few points. And like you said, their defense played pretty well against the Broncos last week in a game where the Broncos were starting everyone and were trying their best to win that game to, lock up. I don't think lock up the 1 seed. But anyways, yeah. And they were playing against a weaker Chargers team, not trying to discount that. But I do think this Chargers team is solid enough on offense, even without their starting tackles, to potentially beat this Patriots team, to surprise them in round 1. This is Drake Maye's first playoff game. I think people kind of discount how impactful that is. I mean, it's a big game for him. There's a lot of pressure. This is the game that could truly solidify his legacy this season, as Drake Maye is here. He is the future for this Patriots team. If he goes out and just is slinging it all over the place against this Chargers team, then I could definitely see that. That being said, I am going to go with the Chargers over the Patriots in a little bit of a shocker, but I think it could be a close game as well. Anyways, but I do think the Chargers come out with an upset over the Patriots. Anyways, moving on to Monday Night Football for the playoff game. We got the Texans taking on the Steelers. Aaron Rodgers, this could be his last season in the NFL's last playoffs ever. The Steelers win and go into the playoffs on a missed field goal. Ty, just real quick, we didn't get to kind of react to that game. What are your thoughts on the ending of that Ravens-Steelers game? Do you think the Steelers are the better team, or do you think the Ravens would have been a better threat in the playoffs?
I 100% think the Ravens would have been a better threat, especially with the way that Derrick Henry has been playing in the latter half of the season. John Harbaugh had realized, okay, maybe we should give this guy the ball in key situations because he is so dominant. I don't think, and obviously Lamar starting to get healthier, was playing pretty well in that game. Defensively, I think if Kyle Hamilton doesn't go out in that game, I think they end up probably winning too, because I think defensively they were playing better in the latter half of the season. I think they were just a better team overall. I know Pittsburgh didn't have DK Metcalf, but, that offense is so one-dimensional. You take away DK Metcalf, you're, again, still forcing MVS, Scotty Miller, Freiermuth, all those guys to make plays, and they are not playmakers. They're second. They're not even secondary options. They are, a third, fourth, fifth option, and you're asking them to be what Devontae Adams is in LA, or it's just an absurd ask, and not to disrespect those guys, but that's just not their level of talent. And Rodgers at this point in his career is not as mobile, so they were having to protect six a lot with Darnell Washington, and they just weren't used. That offense probably should have ran through Jalen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell, and it kind of took them too long to figure that out, and then they weren't consistently going towards that. Arthur Smith has had some struggles and ups and downs as an offensive coordinator, but I just think overall Baltimore was the more talented team, and just the bigger threat because of a guy like Derrick Henry and what Lamar can be.
So STERB says he would probably pick Houston regardless if won that Week 18 game. Ty, what are your thoughts? Do you think the Steelers, since they did get in, do you think they have any shot at beating the Texans?
Nah, I mean, I think the Ravens, their only chance would have been if Derrick Henry had a legacy game. I don't even think the Steelers, have a chance at all. Like, they're going to have to protect six a lot because of how good this defensive front is for Houston. And the problem is, like, when you have such a good pass rush and you protect six, like, you do want to get the ball out pretty fast. Mm-hmm. And Houston's defense just flies. The guys in the secondary, Zisai Share, the linebackers, like, they are just quick to the ball. So a lot of it's knockouts quite often, or an interception if they break fast enough. So it's really going to be hard for them to have a ton of success offensively. And defensively, maybe they can force CJ Stroud into some mistakes. He has been prone to that. He kind of did try to gift the Chargers the game when they played them a couple weeks ago by throwing two just bonehead interceptions. And the offensive line's obviously not great. And that offense kind of does run through Nico as well. Some of the younger guys have started to step up. But I just don't, the Steelers defense is old. They're not consistent. They're kind of bad against the pass. This is probably the worst team in the playoffs. Like, if the Panthers and the Steelers played today, I'd probably pick the Panthers because I at least believe that some of their options, and I believe in their coaching, right? I think Mike Tomlin's a great coach, but their offensive coaching, Dave Canales, has done a great job. Arthur Smith is not, he's not dealing with house money, but he hasn't done great either. So I'm going to go with Houston in this one because I think that their defense, the Steelers might score 10 points and Houston could score 10 points.
Yeah, I'm going to shock a lot of people. I am going to pick the Steelers here in this one. And it is a very, very bold take. And my reasoning here is because the Texans defense has worried me in some moments this last few weeks of the season, right? Last week against the Colts with Riley Leonard, they allowed 30 points. I know that they shuffled out a couple. Boy. Yeah. Hey, Riley Leonard, I have him in Dynasty. So if he turns out to be the truth, I would love that. But anyways, I do think that the Texans, that they had some starters out, obviously, at the end of that game. I'm not trying to say that.
Point, they had already let up 27 points. Though.
Yeah. So I'm not trying to say that was the reason that game alone. The Raiders games scared me a little bit. The Raiders have not been able to do anything. The offensive line for the Raiders was terrible all season long, yet they were able to keep that game alive. And then, yeah, like you said, I think this is a team, the Texans, the offense worries me every once in a while because CJ Stroud does have lapses in his gameplay every once in a while. And he will forget that Nico Collins is a great receiver. He'll forget to throw to him every once in a while. And I think the Steelers team with DK Metcalf back can survive in a very, very close game because they have a good kicker as well in Boswell. He did miss last week in a big moment and the PAT and things like that. Maybe that worries some people, but the Steelers in a close game have the advantage at the kicker position in my eyes. I think however you pronounce his name, Fairbairn, is a solid kicker, but I do not.
Jaime Fairbairn.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, the first name, I'm not even attempting it, but he's a solid kicker. I do think that Boswell is better though, and that kind of gives them an advantage. And it's at home in Pittsburgh. I've been saying the home field advantage I've been looking towards that a little bit more in the playoffs. But I do think that the Steelers, this isn't going to be a very, very close game, similar to the Ravens game last week. If they don't blow coverages like they did against the Ravens, they can win this game. Give me the Steelers to win in a close one in Pittsburgh. STERB said the Steelers worry me way more often than once in a while. And I think that's perfectly fine. I think that's a fair take. They did. I think Gainwell and Warren, the resurgence or the emergence they've had towards the end of the season really does help me towards picking them in this game. I think that, right, they lost to the Browns to end the season a couple weeks ago to end before the Ravens game. Obviously, that's without DK Metcalf. You lose a weapon. Darnell Washington gets hurt, things like that. That kind of switched that whole entire game script to just throwing the ball to MVS the whole game. And that,
but why was that ever the game script is the question. Like, that's what concerns me is their offensive coaching staff thought MVS versus Denzel Ward was our option 3 plays in a row.
Yeah, it is worrying. And maybe that's Aaron Rodgers too, right? Being familiar with MVS and throwing it up to him. I do think that DK Metcalf is definitely better and will provide a little bit more.
He's going to go against an all-pro corner, though, Derek Stingley.
Yeah, but that takes a little bit of the pressure off the other. Like, you don't want Scotty Miller and MVS to go against the cornerback one every single play.
I don't want Scotty Miller on the field.
That is true. No one. Hey, lay off my boy Scotty Miller. Exciting white representation in the building. It's even though he's not too exciting. But anyways, I do have the Steelers winning in a close one. That's my upset. My big upset of the week. That just is like a little bit of a surprise. But I do think the Steelers can win at home and give Aaron Rodgers a little bit more, an extra bump into the season. Maybe he comes back next year, but if they end in like, I don't know, Ty, let me ask you this. Do you think Aaron Rodgers comes back next year, yes or no?
I think there's a small chance. I think that he had a good enough season and was really enjoying it there. And they don't have a clear path to getting a new quarterback, right? They're going to be picking in the 20s. I think right now they're projected to pick at 21. So, maybe Simpson or Trinidad Chambliss, if he has to come out, is available there or the second round or something like that. It does depend on how desperate the teams above them get. But, like, are you going to go out and try to get Malik Willis or Kyler Murray? Like, I think those are better long-term options, but are they the preferred destination with only DK Metcalf a receiver? Like, no. Like, I'd rather go – if I'm going to be 100% with you, I'd rather go to the Jets with Garrett Wilson, Mechie, and A.D. Mitchell than to this organization with Arthur Smith calling plays, especially because Tanner Engstrom is a good offensive coordinator there. There's just too much turmoil in Pittsburgh, and they're talking about, Mike Tomlin could walk away, right? Like, he could walk away if he decides that he'd rather go be up in the booth calling games or, he just is done with coaching. Like, there's a chance that he could just walk away, or next season they have another bad season, he's fired. So, I know Aaron Glenn, there were some talks about him getting fired too, but that's just one example of a situation where, I just don't believe that they are the hottest spot for a new quarterback. So there could be a chance that, they're like, hey, Aaron, let's run it back.
Yeah, I do believe that the Steelers can convince him to come back for one final season. And I do think that would be probably Mike Tomlin's last season as well, right? I think both those guys are kind of nearing the ends. At least they're like, for Tomlin, at least in Pittsburgh, not necessarily his NFL career, but like you said, maybe he's leaning towards going to be a reporter, analyst, things like that, kind of just be done coaching.
Tampa Bay, if Todd Bowles gets fired, he has connections in Tampa Bay. He started his coaching career there.
That would be a nice spot for him, because Tampa Bay, bringing back Todd Bowles in its own self, I'm not even bringing that up because I just think I think it's an atrocious move, but I like it as a Saints fan. But anyways, I think Aaron Rodgers could come back next season. And this is like a very, very early prediction. If they win this game, I think they'd be at pick 23 or 24 or something, like somewhere around there. Elijah Surratt is a guy that I think could move up the boards into that late round one conversation. And he would be a great fit on this Pittsburgh team. He's 6'2", 6'1", and would be like exactly what they need to pair up across from DK Metcalf. And I think that'd be like a great weapon for Aaron Rodgers for an extra season. So that's just a very, very, very early prediction that could come to
I think
fruition.
He'll fall in that area too. And I think the Raiders should try to trade up and pair him with Mendoza again too, because they are another team that's in need of receiver. I was thinking that a ton last night watching that game.
Yeah, I'm a very big fan of Surratt. Like, if I'm in a rookie draft for Dynasty right now, I'm looking at him from pick 1.8 to 112. Like, that is like,
is he your Pat Bryant?
Yeah, but he's much better than Pat Bryant. But I think he's
put some fucking respect.
hey, I'm a Pat Bryant disciple. We all know, and maybe I would even call myself a Pat Bryant prophet, because I was speaking the truth before anyone knew about him. But I am really, really high on Elijah Surratt. I'm excited to see what he does in the draft process. But anyways, Ty, do you have any closing thoughts before we end the episode?
I mean, it's really interesting that you took LA, because, I was just looking at who you picked. I mean, LA would end up going back to Denver. So that would be an interesting matchup. I took all the away teams except for one, so that's definitely an interesting strategy because home field advantage is so big in the playoffs. But I think we've talked about it, this playoffs is just so different than years past, right? There are no true favorites. Even the one seeds, there's questions about both of them, and it's really a crapshoot. I'm excited to see, who comes out on top after this weekend because I think coming into that divisional round, I think we'll have a better idea of teams and how good they truly are. But even then, right, it still might be a crapshoot. So this is probably the most wide open, and we talked about this early in the season too. This is probably the most wide open this league has ever been. Like it was anyone's league truly this year. So, which is pretty cool. You love the parody of it all, and I'm excited. I'm very excited.
Yeah, from like weeks, I want to say like 5 through like 15, we were just saying literally anyone could make the playoffs right now because you have no clue who's good, who's bad. And it finally solidified up like the last few weeks of the season. But now that the playoffs are finalized, like you said, any of these teams could win the Super Bowl. It's very much less likely for the Panthers and the Steelers, but any of these teams have an argument from one aspect of their team where you can say, hey, they could win the Super Bowl because of this. And those are all valid. And I think this is a playoffs, like you said, we're picking the whole bracket, right? If you're doing like the bracket prediction, it's so tough to pick who's winning the Super Bowl because you get to the next round, the conference championship round. You're like, I don't know what these teams are going to look like at this point, and they could either be like, if I'm the picks I had right now, it'd be Broncos, Chargers, Jaguars, Steelers. I think Broncos and Jaguars are easily the pick there. But then the Jaguars and the Broncos, their rematch, like who the hell is going to win that one
twice?
Yeah,
especially
exactly.
After
So
home field, like
it's very
and we've seen all these teams be so hot and cold. That's the other thing, right? We've seen Josh be hot and cold. We've seen the Jaguars be hot and cold. Like there has not been one team in here that has solidified themselves throughout the season. Denver lost 3 games, and there's tons of questions. Seattle lost 3 games, and there's questions about their quarterback play. So, yeah, that's the big thing is we haven't seen. It's not like a bunch of these teams are just being dominant, right? They've been dominant at times, and then they've been so low at others.
Yeah, if the Packers still had Micah Parsons, I'd pretty confidently pick the Packers over the Seahawks.
They lost to Denver with Micah.
Yeah.
Like they lost to the Browns with Micah. Like that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Like the hot and cold is.
It's very tough, and that's the thing. Like with the
crazy.
And then with the Panthers, hot and cold, they took down some big teams this year, and I started off saying that jokingly, but they did take down big teams this season. They took down the Rams, they took down the Packers, and they weren't like viewed as a good team when they did those things. Like it's crazy that the Panthers made the playoffs at 8-9 is one aspect, right? But it's also crazy that in that 8 wins, they beat the Packers and the Rams. They beat 2 other playoff teams. Like it is an absurd thing that they're in the playoffs with the record, but they do have a legitimate chance to possibly win these games. And that's not like,
something I would ever say 2 years ago.
Yeah. Like
when Philly won the Super Bowl, they beat them 2 years ago with pretty much a worse team than they have now. And Philly has the same team. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's going to be a very, very fun playoffs. We look forward to, I'll be posting tweets as it kind of goes along. And what next week we'll break down the divisional round. And possibly like the head coaching cycle, how that's going. This week we had some scheduling issues, so that we kind of had to push it to a live stream today to get it out so that you guys can watch it before the games start. But anyways, that will do it for our live episode of the Jenks Island Podcast. You guys know where to check us out at Jenks Island on social media, wherever you get your podcasts. And feel free to join. I put in the link down below a playoff prediction bracket challenge. Make sure to join that if you guys would like to. There's no prize for the playoff one, but it's just a fun competition. There was a prize for the regular season. And like I said, Cliff, if you're watching this, make sure to reach out to us so we can figure out that score thing. But it's looking like Ryan was the winner this year because he was at number 1 for the last few weeks. I would give that the tiebreaker. But anyways, Cliff, if you're watching, reach out. Ryan, if you're watching, make sure to reach out as well. We will see you guys next week for the divisional breakdown episode.